welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series with your host, me, Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing. Today is episode 37, Turning Your Dissertation into a Book. So this is for a pretty niche audience, but it's something that we've done quite a bit here at Smart Publishing is help academics turn their dissertation into a book intended for a more general audience or a non-academic audience, I should say. And so it's a question that we get from time to time, and there's a method that we use to create a book that will really appeal to and resonate with an updated audience, while being able to take everything that the author has worked so hard on, because putting a dissertation together is not easy, to essentially upcycle or recycle that content, so that they're not starting from scratch again. And usually when they hand us a dissertation, that's all we need. We take it from there, and we do all the converting, and they just do the review. If you're not working with us though, and you're looking to do this on your own, or you're trying to wrap your head around what the differences would be turning it into a book, that's what I'm going to go through here. And in case you're not an academic and you're listening to this, the same could be said for anything that is just more of a maybe specialist type of writing, something that is intended for people who are very close to or more used to the subject matter that you're talking about, or just maybe a more academically elevated audience. So maybe you wrote a really long capstone paper for your master's degree. You've never been in a PhD program, so you've never done a dissertation. That can be upcycled as well. So the same could be said for a lot of writing that is more just sort of pure, um, pure intellectual work rather than intended to entertain and educate. A dissertation is most certainly not intended to entertain, and so it is specifically intended to educate. And so that is the biggest difference that you will want to think about when you think about converting a dissertation into a book, is that you now have to position it first to entertain and second to educate. Because if you can't capture your reader early on and keep them engaged, then what's the point? They're not going to read your book. Nobody's going to read through it. And just because you're entertaining, it doesn't mean that you need to be goofy or pull all these sorts of how should I say it, gimmicks out, and distract from the content of your book. Something can be both entertaining and educating at the same time. Think about reading, we used to get the National Geographic sent to us every single month, when my brother and I were kids, and it was very entertaining, but also very educational at the same time. So you can do both at the same time. It's just in how you go about it. So I'm going to break this down by the specific changes that you need to make. Narrative style, how references are used and embedded, the structure of the writing, the language, the type of language that is used, the addition of more storytelling and anecdotes, and then really just, where you need to start for this, which is who is your audience, because the audience is really going to change. So your audience for a dissertation is an academic committee. So that is exactly who you're writing for. There are a lot of very specific rules that you have to follow when you're writing a dissertation. What the narrative style is, how you even refer to yourself as the writer, and all these different things. All that gets thrown out the window when you're writing a book, because again, the sole purpose of a book that is out there in the general market is to capture and engage its audience. So you need to determine first, who are you writing for? You can have a primary audience and you can have a secondary audience. I would not get into a tertiary audience. Or anything beyond that, because once you start doing that, you start diluting your message. You're trying to speak to too many people all at the same time. So let's look at an example of this. Do I have this on my shelf? Okay, so a recent book that we did that was a dissertation. Um, that we transitioned from dissertation, restoring the broken, and so this book is specifically written for ministry leaders. Could somebody, and it's all about moral injury. People, how do you help people who have experienced moral injury and have this sort of broken part of themselves? How do you lead them into restoration? And so it's certainly the case that, somebody like myself, who I'm not a ministry leader, I would love to, be one day, but I'm not. It's certainly the case that I, as a secondary audience, someone who's just interested in the subject matter, a layperson per se, could get a lot out of this. But it's primarily intended for ministry leaders, and so that's when you read it, who it's primarily speaking to. So that was what we had to identify for that book in particular. So when I'm talking about audience, who are the specific, who is the specific group of people who are you're writing to? Are you writing for teenagers? Are you writing for sports coaches of teenagers? We recently did a book where it's called The Character Code, and it's primarily for players, so teenagers who are in sports, but there is a secondary audience of coaches and mentors in there as well, who can certainly read that and then use that material to improve their coaching for the kids that are on the teams that they coach. So that's the first thing that you need to do, because everything else will flow under that. If you don't know who you're talking to, if you don't know who you're appealing to, then everything else for translating your dissertation is going to be really hard, or it's just going to completely miss the mark because you didn't have your audience in mind. The next the thing that really needs to change is the narrative style. So for a dissertation, they're so awkward. They're so awkward to read. I'm not on an academic committee. I never had. When I was in a doctoral program, I always found writing this way to be so awkward. But like, you have to refer to yourself. If you refer to yourself, you have to refer to yourself in the third person, and you can't use your name. You have to use something like, the author has blah 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 blah. It's really clunky to read it that way, but that's academia for you. Like, apparently if you do it any other way, then like the academic committee just, oh, we can't tell what's going on if you don't refer yourself as the author. I don't get it. It's stupid. But it is what it is. You have to write it that way for it to be accepted, and for you to get a pass on everything. So you're going to throw that out the window. Please, in a book for a general audience, never refer to yourself in the third person. It's really awkward. I'm sure maybe there's some literary styles where like it might make, I don't know, like if you're the author, your name is the author name on the book. I just refer to yourself in the third person when I was a kid, back when I was in school, back when I was playing football. It needs to feel for the reader, it needs to feel personal. It needs to feel like they're reading, this book where the author is talking directly to them. That is one of the keys to reader engagement that you need to employ in your narrative style, so that you can keep people, you can engage people, you can keep them engaged, and you can, throughout your book, make them feel like they've formed this personal relationship with you. At the end of the day, we're human beings. We're all about relationships, and we're all about storytelling. Those are really, really powerful for a reason. Use them. Um, Now, what I would get into next is the language. So we know who our audience is. We're using a personal, first person narrative style if we're, telling personal anecdotes and everything. Now, the language, it's non academic. And it is, um, I would probably say, just based on the topic that you're writing on, there are certain topics where you should probably keep it to an eighth grade reading level. I think that is studies show, like, the average person's reading level is at about an eighth grade reading level. And so if you are trying to put this out to a general audience, people who don't have experience with, academia or anything like that, if you've ever read a book where you have to, like, look up terms left and right because you have no idea what the author is saying, that's like really tedious for a reader to have to do, and you lose a lot of readers that way. Congratulations, you looked smart, but you lost your readers, so who cares? So that is something that most of the time is going to be a good rule of thumb. Now, I will say, if your subject matter or your audience is a little bit elevated, then it does make sense to elevate maybe to a 12th grade reading level. So that might be for business professional stuff, that where your primary readers are going to be, college educated executives. And notice I said 12th grade reading level, but then I said college um, educated executives. I don't know how many of you have worked with executives before and seen their emails, but the college English class didn't take for a lot of a lot of these folks, and they still have a 12th grade reading level. So that is an exception to the 8th grade reading level. You want your language to be accessible. You do not want to alienate your reader by making them feel like you're talking above them. And if your true goal is to teach, then you need to teach on the level of your reader. If you're teaching above your reader, they're not learning anything. And I've talked to, some academics through this before, where imposter syndrome shows up for every single author. Oftentimes for academics, they've had this, like, the academia has imprinted this idea that they have to show how smart and intellectual they are, and so that's something that's kind of hard for them to let go of. um, Let go of it. If you want your book to be successful and you want your book to have a positive impact on people, it's just something that you're going to have to let go of. You're going to need to bring people in, versus close them out, because the language that you're using is just not accessible to them, or is, alienating to them. Um, Also, the role of references. I've actually done an entire podcast episode on references. I forget which episode it is, but you can go back in the episode history and find that. And a lot of it is me talking about why references are done very differently in books that are published for general audiences versus in dissertations. So a lot of times when you're reading a dissertation, you're going to see, this in parentheses. Usually it depends what the source is. If it's a journal, if it's a book, you write them a little bit differently, but sometimes it's like the last name of the author, comma, the date. Sometimes there's page numbers and where you specifically found it. But it's like in text citation is what they call it. Um, and if you've ever read a dissertation, it's very visually distracting, and it interrupts the flow of the reader reading. There's a reason they do it in academia, because you have to back, all of these different studies and claims and things that you're referencing, and you have to like, you know, honor the people, the shoulders of the giants that you're standing on, who did research, ahead of you. So it makes sense. But for a general audience, we can still honor people without disrupting the 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 flow of somebody reading, without creating these visual distractions that make it very hard for someone to just read from the next line to the next line to the next line. So my favorite way, and this is a very, very common way in publishing to do it, is with what's called superscript. So if I'm making a reference, instead of having an in-text citation that again is very visually disruptive, I'm putting a numerical number, and for every chapter you start at 1 and then you go up if you're going to do your chapter by chapter references. And so if I have the first one, I'm going to put a number, I'm going to highlight that number, and I'm going to go to my text formatting, and I'm going to choose superscript, and it's going to make it this tiny, tiny little number that is up at the top of the end of my sentence, or maybe it's after, a comma or something, just depending upon where the reference material is that you're using. And then at the end of the chapter, you can also do it at the very end of the book. So you can have references at the very end of the book by chapter, or you can do it at the end of each chapter. Again, I won't get into preferences and when to do which. Go back and listen to the references episode if you want to know more about the approach for that. But then you're going to see those chapter references, and then you'll see they're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see, okay, so for this superscript 1, that coincides with this number 1 reference down here in the chapter references. Okay, cool. So you're still citing your sources, you're including references, but it's not visually disruptive, and a person is able to read through without having to visually bypass this huge parentheses with a bunch of stuff in it. So again, references are done very differently, and should be done very differently in books written for general audience. The next thing is structure. So if you've seen a dissertation, they're double spaced. I hate double spacing. They're double spaced. Typically in most traditional publishing, you'll actually see a 1.15 spacing versus double spacing. Also, a lot of folks are still putting the double space in between each sentence. Please stop doing that. That is an antiquated practice that is left over from the use of typewriters and word processors that were not very accurate or precise at the amount of space from one sentence to another. So don't do that. Editors hate that, because then they have to go and take out each single one. It drives us nuts. So you should not use the double spacing between sentences, and then you should not use in terms of the amount of space from one line to the next, the line spacing, you should not use double spacing there. But you will see that in dissertations. And then in dissertations, that's really it. Like, I think that some will have like some charts and things like that, but usually those are very again, academic charts where you can see like, the numbers on the specific research study that they did. So they might have some tables, they may have some graphs, but again, it's not really included as much for reader engagement as it is included for backing your research up with hard numbers and hard evidence. So the structure of a book should be everything from your chapters, how you're breaking your chapters out. Again, dissertations don't have chapters. Within a chapter, you can do subheaders to break up large sections of text. So each sort of natural transition has a section where it's broken up. It makes it easy for the reader to put a bookmark in it and then come back if you have a longer chapter, so it's not demoralizing and they're like, when is this thing ever going to end? Cool, section header. Psh, I'll come back and I'll know that that's where I'm supposed to start. Also, I love using call out boxes and pull quotes. Call out boxes are just visual boxes that have, like, you know, quick little takeaways from that one section in the chapter, or maybe it's like, a quick little snapshot of data, or just some really interesting call out. That's why it's called a call out box, that you want to highlight. Pull quotes are things that are like, I call them like mic drops. Like a pull quote is for something where it's like, boom, that really highlights and encaps, it really captures the essence of like the key principle or the key learning that I want you to take away from this section. And it just means, a pull quote or a PQ. It's just formatted differently to stand out. You've probably read books before to where all of a sudden there's like this nice big quote, in the midst of the text, and it serves as a way to, again, break up the text, add a little bit more engaging formatting, and retention with the key things that the author wants you to to remember from what they're writing. So and there's all sorts of other things that you can do with images. I mean, creativity there's no limit to your creativity on this. One of my favorite books, by Julie Dirksen, and it's called Design for How People Learn. My background is as an internal communication specialist and a learning and development practitioner. Um, and so that was a book that was really influential for me as a learning experience designer when I did that work. And she draws like stick figures and stuff throughout the book because she literally understands how the adult mind learns things, and she knows that visual reference is really important in that. And so her book will have some text here, and then she breaks it up with drawing visual examples of what it is that she's talking about. And it's really effective. It's really engaging. And that book is absolutely awesome. So I hadn't seen a lot of books that approach had been done before hers. So that just goes to show that, again, sky is the limit when it comes to the creativity on this. Again, your goal is to capture your reader, keep your reader engaged, and have your reader walking away with what you wanted them to walk away with. Now, lastly, I will say storytelling and anecdotes. So in dissertations, case studies and things like that are added in. They always feel pretty dry. Try to make an engaging, approach to any kind of anecdotes or storytelling that you will have. Storytelling is absolutely fantastic. I don't care what genre you're writing in. We have been telling stories since we've been human, for a reason. It's something that we are all very interested in. We're interested in the stories and the experiences of others, and stories are one of the best ways that you can teach. So include anecdotes and stories within what you're writing to illustrate and bring to life what it is that you're trying to have your readers walk away with. And so that may be how you structure each of your chapters. And when you structure your chapters, just know you need a consistent structure to those chapters. You can't just open one with a story and then in another one you take this different approach. The reader needs to understand what the structure is, and it needs to be that same structure in each one. So if you open with a story and then you go into like more teaching academic and then you have like key takeaways, that needs to be the structure of every single chapter. Otherwise, it's going to be a very clunky and disjointed reading experience for your reader. So that is what it looks like to turn your dissertation into a book. So just to summarize, number one, figure out who your primary audience is. That is the most important thing that you can do to make sure that you are writing uh, the right way based on who those people are. You can have a secondary audience. Don't go too far beyond that because then you just start diluting things. Your narrative style needs to be, if you're the author, first person. When authors talk about themselves in the third person, it feels really, really awkward. And then, the language, non-academic language, don't alienate people, make it accessible. Also, in your references, please no in-text citations, use superscript, footnotes, those sorts of things that are non-intrusive and do not interrupt the flow of a reader visually. When it comes to structure, your chapters should all have the same structural pattern, and they should include things that break up the text, things like call out boxes, pull quotes, graphs, pictures, images. Like I said, Julie Dirksen did stick figures, and it was awesome. The goal here is not to be accepted by an academic committee. It is to be accepted by your reader. So that is the biggest thing that you want to think about. And finally, there's a reason that we love stories. We love hearing about stories. So include storytelling and anecdotes to bring to life what it is that you're trying to get across to your audience. And if you have any questions, like I said earlier, this is something that we do often here at Smart Publishing. So always feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook. That's where I am most often. Renée Lautermilch. I am the only one in the world. So if you search me, I'm the only one who will come up. Friend me, follow me, and send me a direct message if you have questions. You can also find me on smartpublishingservices.com. And if you have not already subscribed to this show, hit that subscribe button. Tell somebody that you know about it too. And if you have 60 seconds, I would be so appreciative if you would leave a rating and review. It helps get this content out in front of more people who can benefit from it. So thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, keep writing your story because the world needs your voice.